salutation, dance for the sun. Sun salutation, dance for the sun. Sun salutation, dance for the sun. I can do it, you can do it, we can do a sun salutation. Stretch up high, hang down low, tickle your toes, feet jump back, just like a frog, belly on the ground, just like a snake, look at the sun.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, maybe a bit irrational Seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into the controversial topics that some may call new age, or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And hopefully look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
This episode, we're sitting in the lotus position, ready to chat about yoga. I'm not sure we need to explain what yoga is, but just in case, we have an expert. Kat's a yoga teacher, so she should definitely know. What is yoga?
Well, yoga. That's basically how most proper yogis will start this conversation. But in short, you could say that yoga is both a physical practice, so the kind of positions or asanas that you take, and it's also a state of being. So we'll get more into what that means in a bit.
Okay, so as we've hinted, Kat has lots of personal experience with yoga. I have quite a lot of personal experience with yoga. So we're going to chat about that before we get into the weeds. So before you started getting into yoga, what were like your expectations as a seeker coming to this? What did you think?
Well, before I ever did yoga, I guess it was, for me, probably something that hippies do, you know, and quite far from being a sport as such, or like an exercise. And I definitely didn't really know about the history of it or what kind of meaning it had for the people who kind of began it.
So basically something that hippies do. That was your definition.
Yes.
I guess as a skeptic, I've always been a bit embarrassed about the fact that I do yoga, because I think a lot of like woo adjacent things, like maybe those ankle bracelets with little bells on. Yeah. I think you get a few raised eyebrows if you wore them to a skeptics convention. There's no reason why skeptics wouldn't like to have silver bracelets with little bells on their ankles, but we generally don't. And we have this rule about things like that. It's not a rule, it's a cultural norm that we don't do that. Like we'll make jokes about green juice, for example. Like skeptics just make jokes about that because people make ridiculous claims about the benefits of green juice. But if you actually just quite like green juice, you wouldn't proudly carry your cup of it into a skeptics convention. Okay, so people would look at you like you're a bit weird.
It's almost like these things symbolize something else.
Yeah, they're cultural markers of the people who like the stuff that we don't like, which is woo. So, but I mean, there are a lot of dubious health claims and potential dangerous things about yoga. So they kind of have a point, the skeptics. But yeah, I've been into yoga for ages and it's not something that I'm like out and proud about. I'm coming out. That's what I'm saying.
Amazing. So,
if that's not offensive comparison.
But really, like, how did you start? How does a skeptic end up doing yoga?
Well, I had this accident when I was like 16, a piece of scaffolding. I was at school doing one of those world convention, like where you pretend to be different countries and then you like try and negotiate with each other. It's supposed to teach you about politics.
That's stressful.
And in one end, very stressful. So we were trying to sort of trade agreement out with Israel, as you do. And I went over to like stand in a corner to look through some votes. It was all like very, I was quite into it. And then out of nowhere, from my perspective, this big metal bit of scaffolding just fell down from the side of the school hall and hit me on the back just above my coccyx. And it was like you know those nuts that join two pieces of scaffolding together? They're like big metal braces that grab around one bit of scaffolding, grab around the other, and you tighten them with nuts. So that thing, that weird shaped pokey thing, that's what hit me, and it took the whole weight of the whole bit of scaffolding.
Wow.
So my back was fucked, as you can imagine. And I ended up going to see doctors about it and having x-rays and all that shit. But it's more or less okay now. But I was taught a lot of physiotherapy for it. And then at some point, whilst I was being taught that physiotherapy, someone mentioned yoga. I was like, well, that sounds a lot cooler. As a 16-year-old girl, being into yoga is a lot cooler than doing a physiotherapy. So I'm making this sound like a much worse back injury than it is. I'm absolutely fine now. I just get occasional aches and pains. But it was dramatic at that time in my life. And that's when I sort of got into yoga and I started like doing a brilliant DVD. I would recommend it. In fact, I bought it on VHS at the time, and then I bought it again on DVD later. This is how much I would recommend this. It's Jerry Yoga. You know Jerry from the Spice Girls?
What? Oh my God, yes, Jerry.
I know.
Yeah. The ginger one.
So
she was me.
Yeah, she was you. Briefly, she was really into yoga, apparently, and she made a yoga exercise video, and it is really, really good.
That is bizarre.
Like,
I did not expect that.
I know. Well, I don't know if I still have the DVD, but if I do, I'll lend it to you and you'll see. It's hard to get over the fact that it's Jerry.
I wonder if we can find some clips on YouTube.
Probably. She's insanely skinny in this. That's the only thing. You do worry about her because, I mean, I don't know what her history is with her body or what's going on there, but it looks unhealthy. Yes. But the yoga is amazing. So I did that all through my teens. And then I went traveling, when I finished university, and one of the places we went to was India. So I was like, well, you've got to check out yoga whilst you're in India. And we were in Dharamsala, which is up north at the foothills of the Himalayas. Really, really beautiful. And I was there with a friend. Actually, it's a friend of mine, still a friend of mine. Let's call him John. So I was there on holiday traveling. We were there for like 3 months in India before we came from Nepal and we're going somewhere else. I don't know. You know what it's like. You're in your early 20s. You're traveling around Asia. Things get a bit mad. So we found this guy. He's amazing. I mean, he was amazing. I don't know what his deal was, but he was selling yoga classes to Western people. Smart. So we went along. Yeah. That's the thing. I was just about to say he was this amazing guru. He had this energy about him. And I was like, or he was just a normal guy who sort of did a little bit of an act for us tourists. Anyway, who knows? But he was called Sivadas, and he took us on, just 3 students, me, Paul and John. Paul, my now partner, and John, my partner then also, but now even more serious partner. Weird. Okay. So the 3 of us are there and we're having yoga lessons from Sivadas, and he is, and we're doing it in the heat as well. We'll talk a bit about Bikram later, but doing it in the heat of the sun is crazy out on his balcony. And this guy's like, he's got like silvery bits in his hair, but his body looks like the body of a 20-year-old. Wow. And quite often before he taught a class, he'd just been doing some self-massage. Okay. That's what he called it.
All right.
So he'd come out of his little place where he like had a flat, and then we did the yoga on his balcony. So he'd come out of his house, I guess his home, I assume it's his home, in like hot pant type, but not actual hot pants, but just sort of things of that sort of dimensions. Yeah. And then all his body was just oily with some
spiritual
kind of
liquid,
cocoa butter. Yeah, he'd been rubbing into himself when he was doing his self-massage. And he would do these amazing and really hardcore lessons. And John got very, very good at it. I mean, we were talking before we started recording about a yoga pose. What was it called? The peacock.
Yeah.
And when I said, oh yeah, I have seen that actually, it was John. When John was young, I mean, he's still a straight hottie now, but when he was young, he was very, very fit and, very slim and very supple and very strong. He was amazing. So he got into all this stuff much more so than me and Paul did, and ended up he was photographed for some yoga magazine whilst we were out there. Anyway, sorry, I could go on forever about yoga. So I got really into yoga there. And then sometime during this time, my mum started training as a yoga teacher. So she got into yoga too. And she got particularly into yin yoga, which is one of my favorites. And you'll know, but the listeners should know, this is the lazy person's yoga.
Yeah, the idea here is that you're getting into the the fascia. So that's the connecting stuff all over the body.
Yeah, the really deep stuff. So you get into a pose that for someone who's not done much yoga will look like quite an uncomfortable pose and just stay there for like 5 minutes. It's amazing. I love it. Because all it takes is endurance. And I'm good at enduring discomfort. I'm just not so good at actual physical exercise. Anyway, so my mum got into that and I tried a bit of yin. And I got back from India. I went to a Kundalini class a few times, which was intense.
Yeah, I bet.
And Kundalini they're trying to like bring up, this is just because my mum happened to be like tasting all the different types of yoga at this time. So I went with her once in this just random class in Singapore. And it was just like weird singing and holding stress positions and vibrating and there was a chant, there are like strange noises you had to make. I said singing, but it's not even really singing. It's like noises that they make, isn't it? Actually, maybe I can remember it. Okay, I'll just back off the mic a little bit so I don't horrify our listeners. But I think it went a little something like this. Ek on set na city wa hey guru. Little bit something
That's
like
amazing.
That.
I know what so Siddhi means, like, that's like their superpowers. So,
oh, is it? I don't know. The lady never explained what it meant. She just taught us this series of syllables.
and guru is a word that they use. So.
Yeah, I think that must mean guru. She probably taught us to say, "You're my guru, I love you."
Give me superpowers.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But the idea is that the vibrations that you make whilst you make those sounds, like somehow excite different energy centers and chakras and all this stuff. And what it does is it coaxes up this coiled serpent of energy from the base of your spine. And then it shoots right up out the top of your head and you have this spiritual awakening.
There you go.
That's Kundalini yoga. Mm-hmm. I think I've captured that, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Excellent. Once we were in that class and a woman got up after the end of the class, after the savasana, which is corpse pose or just lying on your back, which is what everyone thinks of when they think of a yoga class, the best part. She gets up and she just walks straight into this plate, like we had this big pane of glass with a door in it, but it was all glass. It's a big, beautiful yoga studio, and she just walked straight into it, didn't realize it was there. And she said it was because she was in the Kundalini space because of the spiritual awakening.
Oh, so it's almost like another dimension, and the glass doesn't exist.
Where glass doesn't exist.
That's not what the 17 stitches said.
She was quite dazed. And then I came back to London at some point and lived in London for a long time. And whilst I was there, I was working at a yoga studio in exchange for free classes. It was really cool. It was like a co-op. So I just kept up my practice, going to free classes and kind of being around other yoga people, reading the yoga magazines behind the desk and stuff. And it's only more recently, when I moved to Brighton, which is where we live now, more or less, where like I don't go to any classes anymore. I do some yoga on YouTube with Yoga with Adrian, who's amazing. Mm-hmm. And I stretch, obviously, but I don't have a solid practice like I have done in the past. That's my yoga journey.
That was lovely and a lot more interesting than mine. But
yours is a lot more deep.
I almost was thinking like you could end with saying, and then I cultivated my own special type of yoga. And it can be yours for $17.99. Like, it would be an amazing infomercial.
That's actually something I want to work on, finding a way to practice yoga that feels right for me, because I don't have one right now. And then marketing and selling it.
Indeed. It's the way of life.
What about you? Like, you're an actual yoga teacher. What made you want to teach yoga?
Well, it started a long time ago. But yeah, so different phases. So I guess starting off, I was 17 in sixth form college. And we were told we still had to do PE. And I was never into PE. Always last picked for sports and teams and stuff.
The secret with PE is just to not go to the first lesson of the term. If there's any kids at school right now, this is my hack, my PE hack. If you miss the first class, at least in my school, for PE, the teacher just wrote down your name in a big bit of... They probably don't do this anymore. As I'm saying this, I'm realizing that they probably have iPads and stuff. But she just wrote it down on a piece of paper, everyone who was there in the first lesson, and then made sure those same people were there for the next one. So if you didn't go to the first lesson, you don't exist as far as the PE department is concerned.
Wow, just like taxes. That's amazing. So I saw yoga was on the list. And like I said, at the time, I thought this is something for hippies, which basically means I'll be sitting, cross-legged for an hour. Great, I can definitely do that. But I started to really enjoy it. And I think the teacher we had was Well, considering we were just totally new to this, I think she did a really good job. And I still like remember how she got us to do certain things like a shoulder stand or something, which I think is no joke to kind of teach first time distracted 17-year-olds to do that.
Yeah,
well.
Although they're lighter, so they don't have as much to lift up.
That's true. And I'm sure like it's probably quite a good demographic because even though I wasn't sporty, like I said, I had a young body. I could do these poses. And for once, I found something that I actually liked and felt like I could do. But I didn't really get back into it until after university when I started working in London, and I just wasn't happy. I was going to various classes at a local gym, and I figured I'd try something called body balance. Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, so it's not strictly yoga, but it does draw on some parts of it. And the most important part is, of course, like you mentioned, Savasana.
Good old corpse pose.
Yeah, and it was in those last 5 to 10 minutes that kept me coming back. And I think, got me into meditation as a separate thing altogether. And also just helped me out at this particularly stressful, shitty time of my life. And since then, I still really struggle with pure seated meditation, and I can't really do it. But I do feel like the state that I'm in after a good yoga sesh is as good as, as close to meditation as I can get. So I really do use it for those mindfulness qualities.
Yeah, you're quite a kind of, not to be rude, but you're quite a tightly wound person.
Oh, yeah.
And I can see like how doing some kind of ritual, physical thing would be helpful in being able to relax, because I'm the same. I mean, the reason I say that is because I'm exactly the same. It's I need a physical thing.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like, I can't solve the problem of the busy mind through the mind alone. That's why I need the physical practice of yoga. And again, we'll talk about even the origins of yoga was for that exact purpose. So anyway.
Oh, well, yeah, tell us. Tell us about the history.
Oh, I guess we can start there. I just did want to put in there about my yoga of choice, and I was going to ask you the same, but I think you said yin basically is your.
Yeah, although I don't really do it anymore, but that's the yoga that I've enjoyed the most. As I say, I'm still figuring everything out. What about you?
Mine's like pretty much the opposite, which is Ashtanga. So it's the same sequence every time, and I can't really do even the very beginner's one particularly well, but I just love the repetition of it. And I'm not a very OCD person, but this is when my like need for repetition and routine comes out. And I just really love that.
And is that what you would teach?
I would need to do a separate training on that and just get even better at it. But I would say that most days I will attempt to do, a sort of, on YouTube, if anyone who's interested, you can find kind of like adapted versions of the Ashtanga primary series, and they're excellent. Anyway, I might give them a go and let you know how I go with them. What I was just thinking, I don't want to grill you too much about your career, but the cool thing that you're doing at the moment is putting yoga and astrology together. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that, or is that all too early? I'd love to. I think it's quite funny now that listeners might have heard the astrology podcast that we put out. And I guess that was almost like, for me, the start of my interest. And
it's like the exact opposite of my plan. Basically. I was like, I'll convince her that astrology is bullshit and she'll stop going on about this. We'll nip it in the bud. But instead it just ignited your passion.
It did. And I have seen just a lot of overlaps between the two. And once we start talking about the history of yoga, they basically were coming out around, well, they weren't coming out around the same time, but they went hand in hand at one point in these ancient times. So that's my idea now, but I do want to do it with like somewhat of a, I need to explain that this isn't exactly what it says on the tin. You don't do yoga to like change your astrology outcome or something. This is more like a fun way of igniting, like combining both of these two interests.
Oh, I like this idea of, sorry, this is probably very irreverent, but I like the idea of like a newspaper column style astrology thing. Like, Leos will be suffering from stomach aches this month unless they do the sun salutation every morning.
It's a little bit like that, but I also need to explain that that's not what's going to happen. It's more like, how can you connect to what's happening in the world or embrace this aspect of this zodiac sign, like doing like a bloody lion's pose when it's like Leo season.
Oh, this is lion's pose is amazing. If I'm getting this right, this is the one where you stick your tongue out and roll your eyes up in your head and breathe out like very exactly like that.
Very fun. I recommend it.
I learned that from Jerry Yoga.
Oh,
see, I told you she's good.
She knew her stuff.
I'll put a link to this DVD. I have no idea whether it's still in print or whatever you do with DVDs. Print DVDs? Anyway, I don't know if it's still available, but I'll put a link if I can find it for everyone. And you can either mock me or agree with me that actually Jerry Halliwell is a great yoga teacher.
Yeah, indeed.
And we should all follow her wherever she
she's
goes.
ginger, so I like her.
Yeah. So, yeah, the history of yoga.
Indeed. So, as far as I know, no one knows exactly when yoga officially started. But there are guesses as to maybe 5,000 years ago.
Wow.
At least that's when they think the Vedas, or these very, very old spiritual texts, were written.
And where's this? This is in India?
Yeah, like, I guess people talk about the Indus Valley.
Oh, okay.
So that's the part of the world, I guess, we call India and some surrounding places now.
Right.
Not clued up on my historical geography, but let's say the Indus Valley. And so these covered everything from when to plant crops, as well as like the origin of the universe kind of stories. And again, this is kind of where you'll see hints at what they were doing with looking at the planets as well. So the Vedas really do have like kind of the seeds of these things. But I will say that they did not have the physical like posture practices, the asanas.
Okay, so what part of yoga do they have?
It's more to do with, I guess, the philosophy, which will kind of come to, the idea of the energies, the sun and the moon, stuff like that.
I actually don't know that much about yoga philosophy, despite the fact that I've been quite involved with yoga for quite a long time. I really don't know that much about the philosophy, which I think is
there is a lot to know. That's for sure. Like, on my teacher training, just realizing the extent of it. Anyway, we'll do our best to cover it today. So the Yoga Sutras came later, and this is what people are likely to be familiar with. I mean, I've got an app. you can read a sutra a day, and they were written by a potentially fictional character, Patanjali. And that was
I've heard that name.
And that was maybe, they say 2,000 years ago. I would say it was probably more recent. Like, a lot of these texts are touted as being older than they actually are. Anyway, there's our arguments. But at this point, the word yoga was used meaning to yoke or to join two oxen together. But really, the words that Patanjali kind of made famous was this idea of ceasing the chattering of the mind, in the hope of yoking with the divine. And there's this. So
it's like, I've heard it described as a union between body and spirit. Is that kind of the same thing?
It's more like between spirit and spirit.
Oh, okay. Between your spirit and the sort of world spirit.
Little self and big self, or Atman and Brahman.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I knew that yoga meant union, but it had always been described to me by Jerry Halliwell as a union of body and spirit, not of... Yeah, that's really interesting.
I really think it is more on the spirit side, and it's like the body isn't important. It's almost like a distraction, just as like the mind is. So the first line of the sutras is Yogash Chitta Vritti Nirodha, said very correctly, but it basically means yoga is the steadiness in the field of the mind, or yoga is ceasing the like the rotations of the mind, which, just like side note, the one I would say like spiritual experience I've had, or kind of trippy experience from ayahuasca, I tell the story where I really kind of saw the rotations of the mind for what they are, like really like a record on repeat. and how horrifying that was.
You're sounding a little bit like a mad hippie. Maybe you can put it into a bit more context.
So we know the fact that
no, because like you're on ayahuasca. Are you having a vision? Or?
This was like, in theory, after the trip should have like ended, like the hallucinations and all of that has gone, and I was just left with the. You know, you hear this mental voice, not like crazy mental,
yes,
but you can hear your own voice in your head, and it will come up with an idea, and that's fine. That's how we exist. That's what we do. But I was seeing these thoughts as like separate and on a loop. Like I kept having the same thought over and over again and becoming very aware of it, which we do all the time, right? We're always.
I guess we do. We're just not aware of it.
Exactly,
in that way.
And it's like what. It's anxiety. It is that thing of I'm going to keep repeating the same bothering thing. And this idea that I just get excited because this idea that yoga it's stopping that, it's letting that stop is incredible.
This sounds so much like the way that sort of Tibetan Buddhists describe meditation.
Yes, right. So for me, and I think for the people back then, yoga was meditation. So even in those Patanjali texts, the only yoga pose here, the only asana, and the word asana actually means seat. So the only pose is lotus position, so sitting cross-legged. He doesn't even talk about anything else. The whole point of yoga then was to sit in meditation.
Wow.
So it wasn't until the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, difficult word, which was kind of more like 14th century CE, but let's say that some of the concepts were in development quite a bit earlier, 7th or 8th. And this is when the poses that we would recognize today come about. And there were like 14 traditional poses, including like some, I think there's a really random one, you know, like turtle, or I think it's called turtle. Like they're not like the most fun poses in the world, but they came about in this Hatha yoga thing.
So is this the same, the meditation guys, they start doing poses as well, or is it a different group that are doing the poses?
It's the same people, like I would say it's the same like lineage. What the change that happens around this time is that, you know, in the same way that the Bible went from being just in Latin, just for the high priests and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was translated and it was made public. That's exactly what happened with the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It was kind of taken away from just these ascetics or these people who would go and do their yoga, and you had to like apply to go and work with them or learn from them. This was a way of kind of making it available for all. Wow.
I read in researching this, you've read it too. In fact, you may have recommended it to me, Hellbent by Benjamin Law. And in that, he talks about, it's a really interesting book if you're interested in yoga and the history of yoga. But he talks specifically about his experience training for competitive yoga. And he compares it to a group of yogis, I guess it would be, who were more like, I would call a Baba. That's what they call them. When I was last in India, that's what they were being called. Sadhus, like wandering holy men. They're kind of homeless and they just go from place to place and they take alms and they dress a bit strangely and they have strange ideas and they're very eccentric, amazing characters. Well, I'm sure some of them are dicks, some of everyone are dicks, but the ones I met were great. And he talks about like a group of these guys living in the jungle somewhere doing basically contortionism.
Yeah.
Like really hardcore, strange poses, and maybe using that to make a little bit of money when they go on their wanderings, going, oh, look what I can do. And people give you, like a street performer almost.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how separated it was from this idea of yoga is to unite with Brahman, like how spiritual it was. But I get the feeling from how people lived back then, these things weren't separate.
Yeah.
And it was much more common.
Yeah, well, probably they all mixed together. Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that all of these texts, everyone, I think, would have just been doing the same stuff. And, like the Vedas, spiritual stuff wasn't separated from agriculture. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a weird thing that we think I don't know whether this is a Western thing or a modern thing. We're very quick to put things in different categories.
Yeah.
Like in, when you go to university, you study one thing, you study humanities or sciences. But in these older disciplines, maybe in other parts of the world, there seems like there's more overlap between them.
Yeah, I think it's more just like, that's how things began. They had no reason to have different, to separate it all. Yeah.
Yeah, and then people specialize, and that's what we do now. We specialize, and we just do this one aspect of whatever discipline we're doing, and everything gets all separated. I think there's something to be said for mixing between, mixing the kind of the sort of hardcore physical exercise guys with the meditation guys, and like I don't know, yeah, being able to be. I don't entirely know what I'm saying, but I'm thinking like to be a fully rounded person, you have to take from lots of different things.
Yeah, but I mean, just like, I guess as the skeptic, I'm just wondering if you think that too much of that is like saying, if I started calling astrology a science.
Yeah, that would probably grind my gears.
Damn, I thought I got you.
I think I'm thinking more in like, less in a how I understand the world, but more in like how I understand. What is that noise?
Ah, fuck.
Hi? Oh, no, you're back.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, I heard that go as well. Did you record?
What was that weird beeping?
Oh, we lost connection.
Oh, okay. It's fine. Are you putting the Skype on back to record?
Yes, that is on now. That's fine.
Okay, great. Oh, I can't even remember what I was saying because I was babbling like
I
a
think
moron.
there'll be a cut in there that will be fine. So
okay, cool.
Do you want to start to?
Seriously, I cannot remember what I was saying.
That's fine. No, I think we were just talking about the idea of combining different things like
oh
sciences.
yeah, and you said as a skeptic, isn't it annoying to if you called astrology a science? And I said yes. So can you just ask me that question again, and then we can cut in there.
So since you're the skeptic, wouldn't it be a problem if I started calling astrology a science and getting it mixed up with like yoga being a science and the spiritual aspects being biology? Could we mix them all up?
Okay. I think I maybe got a bit carried away with my stream of consciousness talking about yoga thing, because obviously you're right. There is a difference between a science and there's a difference between the science and humanities. There's a difference between, dancing and I don't know, physical therapy, like, and I see yoga as more in it's, I don't think of it as a science. I think of it as, just a nice thing. It's like a hobby. And that's what I meant when I was talking about being a well-rounded person, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like the people who are only focused on one, like they only read like 18th century history novels.
Yeah.
Like that's their thing and that's all they read. That would be a boring person. So I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to like just believe in random things that you go like around the bookshop and then just point at whatever book and say, I'll believe whatever's written in this book, no matter what section I'm in. And I've got like the Quran in one hand and I've got something about UFOs in the other hand. And I've got, I don't know, like Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe in my third hand, my third imaginary hand. So that would be a bad idea. But it's like to have an interesting and fulfilling life, I think embracing things from different places and different ideas and different disciplines.
It's almost like it's nice to go to the bookshop and have access to the different sections, but not to get confuse one section for another.
Yes.
Nice.
That is a brilliant analogy. Yeah, I'll use that. So that's kind of where yoga was in the ancient world.
Basically, and just one more thing about hatha, because I find the translation really interesting. So some people say hatha means sun and moon, which is interesting because of the astrology stuff, but I'll just
for our listeners, hatha is a type of yoga. People will say, I'm going to a hatha yoga class, right? That's how you'd experience it in day-to-day life.
The other assumption I think a lot of people make about hatha yoga today is that it's like one of the more gentle, you might see gentle hatha yoga, and
that's exactly what I'd assume. If I saw a bunch of classes advertised on, in a gym or something, and it said hatha, I'd think that's going to be the relaxing one. That's going to, lots of savasana.
But actually, it means forceful. So it was like forcing spiritual enlightenment in a way, and that wasn't a bad thing. But certainly, it did not mean take it easy.
Oh, that's really interesting. So does this kind of comes from those people, because they had this idea that if they just push their physical bodies hard enough, that it would like spark some kind of spiritual awakening.
Yeah, and if
idea?
you've done really intense yoga, like for me, I definitely feel a lot more tripped out personally than I do from a restorative class. But that's just maybe.
But I think actually, the hatha as it's come to be used today probably does fit my expectations more. I mean, what do you think? Like when I used to work at the reception at the yoga studio, when I saw hatha classes going on, they were actually the more relaxed ones. So maybe it's sort of, I guess Western people have got it wrong.
Yeah,
They're doing something different.
Yeah, I think so. I think the traditional hatha yoga, you'd probably be closer, I think, in something more like an Ashtanga class. But anyway, it's split down so many different routes since these early years, and it hasn't.
Yeah, I just didn't want to scare our listeners. I didn't want to scare our listeners off turning up to a hatha class because they're like, "Oh no, that means force. That means violence." I won't go to that one.
It generally will mean that you're going to have a nice class. I teach hatha yoga. It's nice. Well,
your classes are always nice classes, so yeah.
So, what about the physical benefits of yoga? Because I know it it's a cure-all, right? It's a cure-all.
Far from a cure-all, unfortunately. But we should probably mention a little bit like what happens when yoga comes to America, because it's not even thought. The idea of it being a physical discipline is something that sort of arose in America, as far as my research leads me to believe. So there's like the earliest export of yoga from India or whatever the countries were called then, to America is in 1893. I'm pretty sure India existed in 1893. This guy called Swami Vivekananda.
Oh yeah.
Like that's
Viv.
a familiar name Oh, Viv. So he came across and he was bringing the more sort of meditative yoga that you've described. He didn't even use the word yoga and he didn't really teach any poses or anything. It was all just, basically meditation, a particular type of meditation. And that's not really surprising because apparently, again in this book, Hellbent is where I'm drawing a lot of this from. He says that the higher caste Indians actually looked down upon the asanas, and they were more interested in the meditative style. And the same for the colonists as well. For the English colonists, it's like a class issue there. So he comes there in 1893, and then that's all America knows about yoga. But they do have this thing that they're doing, because at this time, and we're talking about like the early 1900s through to 1920, they're getting into this thing which is called physical culture often, and it's happening all over Europe as well. It's just like calisthenics and stuff. It's basically that moment where people got so comfortable that they realized it wasn't good for them to be quite that comfortable. And so they started what we think of as modern exercise culture, I suppose. And there's a particular thing in America called harmonial gymnastics.
That sounds like something I'd like.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought, but I can't find that much about it. It's referenced once in that book, very briefly, and I did a bit of a Google, had a look around, found a few things, but not that much. But the image I have of it from what I've read is that it was all women, usually. It was like housewives. And they'd come during the daytime and they would do stretching and breathing exercises, and they talk a lot about their health and about how to make themselves feel more comfortable in their bodies. And they also had this idea that if they got everything aligned with their breathing and their bodies and everything, that they'd be much more successful in their lives, including economically successful. That seems to be an interesting spin on it they had. So this harmonial gymnastics, I mean, that weird little...
Sorry, continue.
Weird little blip in the history of the history of exercise and the history of, which is not something I never thought I'd be interested in until I started researching this episode. So you've got the Vivekananda and you have the harmonial gymnastics. So there's clearly two needs that are happening in the American populace at that time. Women want to have stretching and, feeling more present in their body experience. And also there's a lot of people, most of them hippies, who are interested in meditation, which sets the stage perfectly for the next wave of Indian gurus who come in. And they are presenting more like what we think of as yoga today. They've already made that connection between the body and the meditative stuff, and they're bringing what you're describing from India, just the whole series of postures and the breathing and a little bit of meditation and corpse pose at the end. They've got it all down, and the American public just love it because it's fulfilling their needs, I guess. And it goes just amazingly viral, and suddenly everyone's doing yoga. Celebrities are doing yoga. Everyone's talking about yoga. People are starting to make money by selling yoga equipment. And it just takes off, which is, and it's not news to anyone who lives in the world today, because we all know, I mean, I don't know whether it's just the circles that we move in, but I feel like everyone I know does yoga.
Yes. It's interesting. I feel like everything you're describing isn't much different from how things are today. People still want it for these different reasons, including to make money, but in maybe a different way. But it's interesting. I was speaking to somebody the other day who, a big guy who does CrossFit. And, you know, I just said, like, do you do yoga? And he was like, no, but, well, I guess we do yoga. We do yoga for CrossFit. He had to admit it because it's such a smart thing to do. Most people will agree now. If you're doing another activity, particularly, it's almost like a yin to the yang, or the calming, soothing, restorative thing to the more vigorous exercise.
Yeah, and all the stretching. I mean, we stretch and we don't have a word for breathing and stretching and focusing on the movement apart from yoga. I mean, because no one does harmonial gymnastics anymore. So whether you really think of it as yoga or not, that's the only convenient word we have to use. So, but I know a guy who does I can't remember power yoga. That's what it's called, which just sounded bizarre to me. So it's yoga that's been kind of butched up. Yeah. And so that men don't feel embarrassed to do it. And all these different types. And so we've got this yoga boom, and one of the big players in this yoga boom is Bikram Choudhury, who is a guy from India, who trained with a very well-known yoga school. He sort of implies, when he talks about it, he implies that he was like the pupil of this guru who taught him everything he knew. It seems more like he went to study with this guy, but other people were studying with him too. But still, he's, as far as the American public are concerned, like the most authentic yoga, or yogi. Would he be a yogi?
I'd say so.
Yeah. So he comes from India, and he is teaching his sequence, which he claims to have invented, will actually sound a lot like when you're describing early Indian yoga. There's like 14 postures or whatever you said. He's basically done the same, but I think there's 26 postures. And he does them all in the same order to large groups of people, which is kind of one of his innovations, the idea of having a large class. So obviously you make more money and you get to help more people at the same time, which is what he'd say. Like, before, he had to just teach one-on-one because that was the traditional way they did it in India. But now he has the opportunity to help loads of people, which is lovely. But also you can take money from lots of different people. So that's also lovely. So this is his thing, 26 postures, same sequence every time, same order every time, and really, really hot. How hot is Bikram studio supposed to be?
I want to say 109 degrees, but it could be a little bit less.
Oh, you're talking Fahrenheit.
Sorry,
I don't know that. I'm thinking like 40, but that's a guess.
I think it would be lower than
Celsius.
That, but,
really? Anyway, really, really ridiculously hot. And I think everyone knows of Bikram yoga, or just hot yoga.
Did I tell you I did a hot yoga class recently, and I hadn't done one for a while. And I had to spend most of it in child's pose because I nearly fainted. Oh. I thought I was going to vomit. It was madness.
Child's pose is just like when you bend your knees and then you're just like tucked over them, like in this sort of
basically,
fetal position.
Fetal position, face down.
Yeah. It's one of my favourite poses. I know it well.
Spent a lot of time on that. Just on a Tuesday night, just 3 hours child's pose. Yeah.
And everyone is just dripping with sweat. Whatever the heat is, it's insanely hot and everyone's dripping with sweat. And you're just forcing yourself into these really quite difficult poses, one after the other.
Yep.
Yeah, it's intense. So this is...
He also made the idea of having a script popular, right? No one else does this, but he's got this specific Bikram script. And if you want to...
Yeah, it's called the dialogue.
Oh, amazing. And I guess if you want to teach Bikram yoga... with the proper registered trademark, you have to learn that exact script, including all of his, grammatical errors and stuff.
Yeah, all his weird little figures of speech and strange little trailings off. You have to learn it beat by beat. And what he did is he realized that he could train yoga teachers basically and have what's it called? Like what's a franchise? Like McDonald's, a franchise. In fact, people call it Muk Yoga, don't they? Bikram is Muk Yoga. So he started taking people away on training. I think it's like a month or 6 weeks or something. It's a long stretch of time. And you go away with him and stay in some hotel in the middle of nowhere where it's all just other yogis there. And you just, teacher training, like you've described it to me, you learn all about physiology and you try lots of different styles of yoga and you learn the philosophy and stuff. That's not what they do on Bikram courses at all. It's really weird, actually, because I learned a lot about Bikram from listening to this great podcast series. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's called 30 for 30, and they just did a series on Bikram. But having Kat describe to me her experience of teacher training and then thinking, a teacher training camp, I know what that would be like. It'd be like what Kat just did. Not at all. They just do this posture series, the Bikram series, again and again and again, in the heat again and again and again. And they learn off by heart the dialogue, and that's it. They don't learn anything about the body. They just learn to get really good at doing the sequence and to say the words in exactly the right way. That's
and
it.
I think there'd be a lot of like listening to Bikram speak.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's the big thing. In the evenings, he'll do like a lecture that goes on for hours and hours and hours, much like another charismatic speaker we know who told us about the Queen and the lizards.
Oh my goodness, yes, much like that. Probably less informative.
If David Icke could just get into yoga, he could have something going there.
I would definitely spend 6 weeks with him doing that.
You should drop him an email. When we went to see David Icke, Kat was joking about getting in contact with him to help him redesign his slideshow presentation because she had some suggestions for improvements.
I would love him as a client. David, get in touch.
And now you can step in and be his business manager and give him some suggestions for some breathing exercises he can incorporate.
Amazing.
Anyway, this guy, Bikram, he is, as it will probably be unsurprising to hear from the sort of description of what he's up to, he's a bit of a intense personality and he doesn't have that much respect for other people's autonomy. And he has basically hundreds and hundreds of sweaty, very fit young women around him all the time that he has massive authority over because he's not only their teacher, but he's their guru and he's the one who gets to authorize them to go about their business. So he can say, yes, you've passed the teacher training, you can go and carry on with your career. He has a lot of power. And as unfortunately many people like him do, he exploits that quite a lot. And there's been many allegations, although this is all allegations, I think. Nothing's gone through. He hasn't actually gone to court and be convicted of abusing anyone.
That's crazy.
But there has been lots of...
He hasn't actually...
I know.
Oh, my goodness.
No, he hasn't. There's been lots of accusations of sexual impropriety. And there was one woman who had the same story that all the women have, which is he sort of forces them to come up to his bedroom in the evening, even though they're exhausted from doing yoga all day. He sort of makes it seem like it's not an option to say no, sort of uses his authority and his position to do that, gets them up into his bedroom and then makes them massage him for hours and hours and hours and watch terrible like country and western movies and Bollywood movies and just all these old weird movies that he loves, makes them watch that whilst they massage him. And then at some point during the evening, if you're unlucky, he will just make some kind of sexual proposition and sort of coerce, very unpleasant sexual interaction. And many women leave feeling just violated and like it was a really horrific experience. Yeah. But they feel like they have to keep quiet about it.
Naturally, especially if you want to make a career out of it and you need the Bikram stamp. Yeah. Yeah,
you don't want to be the one putting your hand up and saying, this guy that you all love, he's a predator. But that does seem allegedly like what he is. So there was this one woman who was also his personal secretary or assistant or help run things. And there have been many accusations, many of which have gone to court, but nothing's happened. But this one woman, she took him to court for the sexual impropriety, plus he exploited her, just like making her work for free and all sorts of businessy exploitation as well as the sexual stuff. And she got a massive payoff. And I don't think he's actually paid her, which is why he's not living in the US at the moment, because he's run off. But that was for the business stuff. So I don't think any of the sex stuff has stuck, but it seems pretty safe to say that, you know,
it's happening.
Not a cool dude.
No, and he's not not alone in that. I think it's more common than you'd like to think, the guru thing and them taking advantage. And like, you know, I doubt they're forcing, as in with like physical violence, but I think it's this idea that if you're worshipping this guru character, you might end up going along and then regretting it later and being like, oh shit, like I was forced into that.
Exactly.
And I just think
and that's what makes it so hard to talk about for women in that position, because it's so confusing. It's like, if it was just simply him using physical violence, that would be terrible, just terrifying and horrible. But at least you'd be clear about what exactly happened.
Yeah.
But this, because it's all psychological manipulation. You have to remember these women are a lot younger than him. They don't, it's gross. But in his defense, just in the sake of balance, I have a quote from him because I wanted to know what he said about these allegations. And I have a quote from an interview with Real Sports. He said, I won't try the accent because it'd be offensive and there's no chance of me getting it even vaguely right. So he said, why would I have to harass women? People spend $1 million for a drop of my sperm. So case closed. An innocent man vilified by the media and us for no reason, because obviously if we had $1 million, that's what we'd get.
Yeah, I'm saving up for that. That is literally why I'm trying to make my first million.
Yeah, if you want to donate to our drop of Bikram Chowdhury's sperm fund, just go to our Patreon page.
This is taking an odd turn. Okay.
Anyway, so that's what basically, and he was one of the people who made yoga big. There was lots of interesting stuff because he tried to copyright his sequence, and there was lots of debate about that in the yoga world, about whether you could copyright yoga, whether you could copyright a sequence, and it's generally decided no, you can't, which is why we now have hot yoga studios and Bikram studios, and everyone's doing the same thing that he at one point thought that he could make his legal property. So that's interesting. And then throughout the 90s, everyone gets into yoga. The Spice Girls get into yoga, for example. So it's all about it's all about yoga. And until like the most recent stuff going down, well, I've got two sort of to give you the idea of the climate of the modern yoga world. One interesting thing happened in 2015, and this is just one incident, and I don't know how representative it is, but I have heard people talking about this online. So there was a class cancelled at a Canadian university, and it was because the students had noticed or felt that the idea of white American people of European descent teaching yoga was cultural appropriation, by which they mean it's stealing, I guess, from some other culture in a way that's offensive, or improper, or just generally a no-no. And so they managed to get this class cancelled. And after that, there was a lot of chat in the yoga world. And I remember overhearing a lot of this at the yoga studio about how we practice yoga in a way that is not culturally appropriative. Very strange situation.
Yeah, I find that difficult to empathize with those students. But one thing is interesting that I've heard on like various yoga podcasts is the discussion of whether we should be like chanting in bloody hell, is it Sanskrit? Anyway, but yeah, should we be doing, because you know, for example, at the start of an Ashtanga class, there's a specific chant you do at the start and at the end, and some. I
just did one earlier.
Yes, exactly.
That might have been cultural
absolutely.
appropriation.
We're going to have to flag this particular episode, but you know, and I know that it actually puts some people off. Which is like
yeah, I found a blog of a teacher who'd been teaching for a long time and was, you know, she was a dedicated yogi. And I read her blog about why she was giving up teaching yoga. I have a quote from her, just to give you an idea of the way that people feel about this, or some people feel about this. She said, "It took me a long time to admit this to myself and make the necessary changes. This realization entails..." So by that, she means realizing that yoga is culturally appropriative. "But what I know in my heart, my mind, and my gut is that what we're doing in Western yoga is an entitled, willfully ignorant act of theft."
Okay.
It's really strong emotions about this.
I just, like, again, if I could try to agree, is thinking, are we taking it too far from its roots? And maybe if we were to look at it as it was to begin with, and if we were like, doing it for the same reasons they were then, rather than using it, for weight loss or something like that, or making loads of money out of it. Maybe in that way, we could be...
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting though, because as we've just talked about the history of yoga, it seems like it's always been changing.
It has.
And it didn't just start changing when it got to the West. It was changing when it was in India, and there are people with different opinions. I mean, India is a huge country with lots of different people practicing it in different ways. So the idea that there's one authentic yoga just doesn't, where would you find it?
And since the, 14th century or before that, people have been trying to spread it. The original people have been trying to spread it. That's the whole thing. So
yeah, Bikram Chowdhury was Indian.
There you go.
And he taught us to do yoga this way. So
Bikram.
It feels like a bit of a trick, doesn't it? Like if it works like this, like people come over from India and teach us to do yoga in a certain way, and then we get really into it and we're like this, and we like this, and then another group of people are just like, no, you can't like that. That's wrong to like that. We're like, but it was literally taught to us. By Indian people.
And it would be interesting to see how many Indian people are saying that we shouldn't be doing this, and how much of it's just our own guilt.
I do think it's, the woman who I'm quoting from her blog was, as far as I could tell, a white European descent American lady. So I think it's probably a concern of people who are very focused on, not offending people and being culturally sensitive, which is great. Obviously, no one wants to take the piss out of the cultures. That would be horrible. But maybe they just get a bit oversensitive on certain topics.
Cautious.
I'm trying to say that in a way that isn't like saying, because I don't think they're wrong to be concerned, but I think this is a bit of taking it a step too far. And the other thing that I found frustrating when I was reading, trying to get a handle on what their arguments were, is there were some people saying, like you were, that maybe it's offensive to try and do the chanting and the prayers and stuff because it's not our place. And then there was another bunch of people saying maybe it's offensive for us not to do the authentic yoga. So it's like you can't win, because if you do the authentic thing, then you're copying something or using something that's not yours. It's almost like when you go... But if you do it your own way, then that's wrong, because you're not doing
yes.
It's a no-win situation, which I guess is why this woman just had to quit.
It's like if you go to another country, you don't not try to speak their language because it might be cultural appropriation. Sorry, I make bad analogies.
Oh, that's actually...
How it feels to me.
That's a great excuse. That's a great excuse to never learn any other language. Just be that obnoxious person who only speaks English loudly and slowly. And if someone says, you could make a little bit of effort, you could be like, no, I wouldn't want to culturally appropriate.
I'm using that.
Yeah, perfect. So that's that whole debate is still going on. I don't feel like it's necessarily a huge debate, but it's in the yoga world. And then the other big weirdness in the yoga world, and this is not a modern thing, because we just talked about the way that Bikram Chowdhury kind of ran his place a bit like a cult, but there are some yoga cults going on in the world now. And
tell me more.
The cult members are people... Oh no, I won't give any specifics, because I don't want you to go there and sign up. Because it's people like us, so the sort of people it's like digital nomads, people who travel around a bit, people who work online so they don't have to be in one place, and so they'll just go and rock up at somewhere like Bali. And there was a big one in Bali which is not there anymore because it's been exposed, but there was a place, actually it's a really lovely place. I went there to see a screening of some environmental film. I didn't go there for the yoga, but there's a place called Yoga Barn in Bali, a really beautiful, huge yoga studio. And there was a woman running a group out of there where she was basically taking people through really intense yoga training, but then also doing a lot of stuff that is this sort of in the cult leader's handbook. So therapy, like those encounter group style sessions that were popular in the 1970s, where people cry and hug each other and shout at each other and pretend to be each other's mothers.
Oh shit, like family constellations stuff.
Oh yeah, you went to one of those, didn't you?
I've close to PTSD experience. I left halfway, but we'll talk about that another day maybe, but
I think that would be a great thing to do for an episode, but let's put that on the spreadsheet. But so those sort of things in the context of cults or cult-like groups, often used to sort of make people feel, you get this instant sense of closeness, which is obviously very powerful for if you're building a community. And also you get to know stuff about people that they wouldn't necessarily tell you in another context. So worst comes to worst, if that person wants to leave your group, you have something to hold over them. So she's doing those sort of things. She's giving people new names. She's encouraging people to think that aggression and violence are kind of authentic expressions of yourself and you shouldn't hold back. So there's lots of kind of physical violence. And all the time, this is like intense, lots of yoga practice, lots of her coming and putting her hands on you and putting you into the right shapes. So she's sort of shaping you mentally and physically. It sounds quite scary.
Oh my God, it sounds awesome.
She would... It's also a demonstration that women can do it too.
Yes.
There's not that many women cult leaders, but this woman did very well for herself. Well, until she was exposed. She would break up couples, tell them that they couldn't, because it was interrupting their relationship with her and through her, the divine. She was having sex with everyone, as you would. So just really like intense. And the way that they do it is very similar to how Bikram did it. You get yourself a beautiful venue. You encourage people to come for a certain length of time, like 6 weeks or a month. And because it's in a cheap part of the world, people can do that. And people, you know, women like us in our 30s, toddle off there for our experience. And we come back a bit shaken. And often people continue to interact with the cult online and like allow the cult to access their internet history and things. I didn't get too deep into this, but there's this whole world of online cults. So you would think, if your cult is online, it doesn't matter, because if you want to leave the cult, you just turn your computer off. But because they're also your Facebook friends and your Twitter followers and everything, they kind of start to exert a grip on people in the same way that you would if you were physically in the same place. And then they can just pull you back for regular retreats to have actual physical contact with other members. And they can take advantage of you in the way that cults always take advantage of you by, you know, financially, sexually, whatever. It's just, it's a really like weird area. And kind of sad, because there's something so positive about the idea of building a community around yoga, because yoga's lovely and that would really work. But then you just get one, you know, I mean, I know I'm not a psychologist or whatever, but like someone with narcissistic personality disorder, whatever, you know, our common understanding of that is, gets in control of that group and it all goes just crazy.
I find it a really difficult subject because I so, particularly at the moment, crave a conscious community, basically. And especially, like you said, nice environment, basically just chilling out and doing some navel gazing and some yoga. But, you know, when does the line cross into cult? When does the line cross into, you know, you basically, like you said, giving them all your money, changing your life in a potentially negative way for them? And I just I'm going to send you because I applied to volunteer at a place. I can't even remember where it is. But, you know, let's say it's Costa Rica. And they sent me over some information and it was a lot. And I haven't read it properly, but I would love to send it to you, see what you think and how many like cult red flags there are. But the title of it is The Conscious Sensuality Approach to Sexual Healing and Empowerment, which I didn't know anything about the sexual part when I applied. But the woman was basically, by the way, you should probably know this stuff. And, you know, it's got like this document with the 3-step communication model, the set approach to sensation, emotion, and thought. Like, they're talking about addiction. They're talking about things where I'm like, hang on, are you a licensed psychotherapist? Will there be people on board who, like, aren't totally out of their minds?
It sounds potentially cult-like. I mean, I don't know. I'm no expert, but I do have, as I've referenced before in this show, my big book of cults. I could look them up in there. I've got like a big fat hardback dictionary with just listed all cults. And I've read a lot about cult psychology because I find it fascinating. And because, like you say, I have that same urge, like a community of people talking about their emotions and being open with each other and connecting, and if in the sunshine, you know, in some lovely foreign country. That all sounds great to me. I could imagine signing up for something like that. So, and you could see how you make that environment, you get people relaxed, and then you just ever so slightly start pushing their boundaries. It's actually quite similar to sexual abuse, what we were talking about with allegedly happened with Bikram. Like, it's that same thing, just gently push at the boundaries, get a little bit further, do what you can until, you know, I mean, there are some people, ex-cult members, who their lives have just been ruined. And obviously there are some cults where the people have ended up dead.
Yep,
so
indeed. Dangerous.
Oh yeah, dark. It can get dark. But there are benefits, obviously, to yoga. One of the main benefits that gets touted is physical, but spiritual side.
Which is,
what's your perspective on that?
This is most important, yoga is first and foremost a spiritual practice. And at least, like I said, that's where it started. So I guess I want to start with like Tantra, because this is the misunderstood, I'm making brackets with my hands like sexy yoga, but it's kind of not.
Inverted comma fingers.
It came about around 200 years after Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And the idea here.
So wait a minute, this is the one where you see like those pictures, like the Kama Sutra.
Yeah, but
and like ancient carvings of people having sex, and they're all like contorted into strange positions.
But like it wasn't about the sex, basically.
Sure. Yeah, that's not why I look at them either. It's not about the sex.
The idea here is to embrace the dance, or lila, which is a lovely word, between Shakti and Shiva, so energy and consciousness. So Shakti represents the moon, it's the archetypal feminine, and Shiva is the sun, the archetypal masculine. So,
is that any relation to Shiva the god?
Yes. Hatha, remember we were talking about Hatha yoga, sun and moon, so it's uniting these two guys. Actually, I should clarify that. With Tantra, so this is where it kind of started, you're just kind of embracing the dance between these opposites. And the idea that bliss here, or enlightenment, is found in the polarity, these opposites, embracing all of the world and not just like...
so it's not about like merging them together. It's about enjoying the fact that they're like the creative tension between them.
That's Tantra. Hatha is combining them. So Hatha developed later, and this is now the idea of combining them and actually forcing them together. So again, Hatha being force. So, I mean, I just find that kind of interesting that even in those early days, it was evolving. But the big thing I take from this is like the point of yoga, it's all internal. It's these internal energies that you're combining.
What do you mean by energies?
That's as far as it goes. It's just like, okay, so we have multiple bodies. Don't know if you knew that, but we have multiple bodies.
That is news to me.
And okay, so we have like 3. So we've got the
wait a minute, the physical body,
which is also known as.
No, that's the only one I know of.
Hang on a second. And then we've got I forget the other 2. So basically, the let's just say the energy body, and then there's bloody hell, I've forgotten the last one, but that's more like.
We won't understand the words
like,
anyway. You'll just say the Sanskrit word and I won't know what it means.
It's kind of like your higher level body. And anyway, they're made up of 5 sheets. I'm going to say this stuff purely to demonstrate how rich and complex and bonkers the spiritual, the philosophy side of this stuff is. So
this is not exactly what you believe.
Oh, no. But I like it as a model. So, these sheets are made up of mind, bliss, prana, being like, energy. That's your breath, your life force. And anyway, the point of this is to say they all exist in the same place, like a hologram. So to say that, consciousness is residing in my brain, which is in my like big old body, that's not really what they're trying to say. They're saying like it's all one on top of the other. They're all here at the same time.
Isn't that the same thing? Because no one's saying that your brain isn't at the same existing in the same space as your body, and that your mind isn't dependent on your brain.
No. But it's more like I'm seeing them as if they took up physical space, they would take up all of you.
Oh, okay. I think I kind of get it.
Which I have previously thought that my consciousness is only in my brain, but they're trying to say it's also in your toe. Okay, so we've got multiple, and I could be wrong. Also, we've got these nadis, or energy channels. So these let Shakti flow through us. Remember, Shakti being energy, the feminine.
So these are like ley lines of the body.
And there are 3 main channels that run basically from our arse to our heads.
Okay, well that's the kind of the Kundalini thing, right? Isn't it? It goes right up your spine.
And if you imagine like a kind of double helix wrapping around a central channel, that's what the yogis see. And the things that make up the double helix are, one is like the channel, there's Ida and the Pingala. So one is left and one is right. And the aim is to wake up this, like you mentioned, this coil of energy, the Kundalini Shakti, which, like a serpent, sits at the base of your spine, coiled, I believe, 3.5 times to be precise. And
how do they know all this stuff with such precision?
It's like visions. Visions.
Oh, visions. Yeah.
And we don't want to forget the chakras. So the idea here is you don't want to get your energy, so the stuff that's shooting up, you don't want to get Mr. or Mrs. Kundalini stopped in any one of these 7 chakras. You want it all to flow. Sorry, I can't be much more scientific about these things.
You can't be too scientific about the chakras, because you see what happens if you're too scientific about the chakras is they turn out not to exist.
So this stuff is like, it's difficult to get behind. And, a lot of my yoga teacher training was spent listening to this wonderful woman, just a fascinating woman, talk about this stuff as if it was fact, but not really. She was equally telling us like it was an interesting story.
Yeah, I think I've noticed this in the yoga community. There's this sort of place where a lot of these stories about energy and about chakras and all those things. There's this place where people hold them, where they don't really think it's true, but they don't think it's bullshit. They think it's, like you said, like a model, like a helpful story. And I find that really difficult, because for me, I just want to know if it's actually, like, is it real? Is this something that I can count on actually existing in the world? Or is it a story? Because I'm cool with stories. But I just find this place where people can hold ideas, and you're great at this, where you can hold something and just enjoy it and be, it can be meta, it can be above truth or falsehood.
And
it's
it's
just
equally
a thing.
satisfying. And this is it. And this is...
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
And this is, interestingly, another thing that... what I stereotypically think is that the East are particularly good at holding the opposites, holding Shakti and Shiva, holding all of these different things and saying yes and no. And the other thing I love...
I mean, possibly, but I mean, you still see such amazing like science and maths coming out of non-Western, cultures, and you need to be sure about what's truth and what's falsehood. If you're into science and maths and medicine, and you see all those things coming out of those cultures too. So, I mean, I'm sure you're right. There are some mystical people who think in this way, but I don't think not being able to determine truth from falsehood is a character.
It's coming back to our library analogy. It's saying that we can have a library full of all of this stuff, but just making sure that all of the books are in the right place.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I love about this is that, unlike other traditional, let's say, religions, this Brahman, the ultimate God, the big self, or God, whatever source, is not outside us. It's to be found inside us. We are it.
Okay, I like that.
Through yoga, you're literally uniting with it. You are becoming that thing, which is mad. And it really talks more to, I think, the idea of consciousness, and similar to what we're doing with, or many of us are doing with hallucinogenic drugs and such, entheogens. Yeah.
Yeah, like accessing different parts of your mind, I guess. Mind. That's how people describe it. Yeah.
It's not like...
Yeah, I get you.
I mean, I think I heard your man Sam Harris say something like that. It's just this idea that...
My boy.
Just like, it's not like these other states are... They only happen, or we're only given them like through the power of an external plant. It's like, no... We have them, that they just like are in us. We just don't turn on that channel most of the time.
Yeah. I think a lot of the problem we have when we talk about this stuff is language, because I as you know, I love meditation as much as the next Sam Harris fan. And yeah, so I get what you're saying, but I would just use different language to describe it, because I don't think like connecting with the big self. I mean, it's a lovely kind of poetic thing, but I would think of it in a more, I don't know whether it's scientific, but just a more practical way, I guess, because I don't know the neuroscience of meditation, but it becomes slightly uncomfortable. And I had this problem generally when going to meditation classes and going to yoga classes. When they start using this sort of language, it makes me feel a bit discombobulated, because I'm like, wait a minute, are you telling me this is true, or is this just a story? And, I think, and this is probably part of the reason why skeptics as a rule don't go to yoga classes, because it's actually quite troubling, like, to not know how you're supposed to interpret what you're being told.
Yeah, I would. Sorry, go on.
No, that's my thought.
No, I agree. And I think, so even from back in the day, there were these different paths to yoga. And I feel like different people are going to want different things. So like one of them, I would say that in theory, you might be interested in like jnana yoga, which is the intellectual.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
That's like you get to enlightenment by thinking, the intellectual discrimination, right? And then you've got bhakti yoga, which is all about like love and the yoga of devotion. So praising the deities and stuff. Karma yoga is the yoga of service, which I'm definitely not interested in. And, you've got Raja, which is more like meditation and looking at these different like internal practices. Anyway, the idea is that you will achieve the same enlightenment, which is to specify enlightenment is knowing that you are not your body. And that's what's suffering comes from the misidentification that you think you are only your body. So, my friend, you are just suffering thinking that you're only your body. And really, the path to enlightenment is knowing that you're not. Ta-da!
Wow. That's going to be really difficult for me then. Because I literally think that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of my brain. So it is my body. I mean, it's obviously not literally my body, but it's a product of my body. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to reconceptualize that as not being of my body. And I think that when I die, that's it. Lights out, no more me. So I don't think I'm ever going to reach enlightenment.
Unless you switch it. So it's like, your body is a product of consciousness.
I don't think I can make that switch. There's just not enough evidence. Yeah. I mean, I could go around and say that, but I think you have to really believe it to get enlightened, don't you?
And this is what I think yoga is letting you do. It's letting you be that idea.
It's brainwashing you.
It's so exciting. I mean, this is... Okay, like, this is what I get excited about, because it's like, what if that was true?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment. I'm just not sure I could ever believe it.
Either way, the journey, the practice of yoga... like that's fun enough, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, I think yoga's brilliant, and I think it's lots of things, as has been clear through this show. It's like it's so many different things. You can basically go in and take what you need and what you want from it. But it's interesting to think, like, has that been a big part of your practice and learning to teach and stuff? Is like actually developing the spiritual side? Like, what's your experience with the spiritual side of yoga? Up
until the last year or so. And becoming more of a seeker through this show. And actually, I didn't think, even when I was starting to do the training, which was only last year, I didn't think I would like that part of things. And again, I kind of thought it did feel a little bit, not cultural appropriation, but this isn't what I grew up with. And I still think about like Carl Jung, his writings on the East is really interesting. He says that Westerners should not dive into Eastern spirituality because it risks a possibly disastrous disorganization of the personality. But his reasoning is that we have the Westerners have Western archetypes, Easterners have Eastern archetypes, and if you're not, without like the racism which was prevalent in his day, just thinking that I wasn't raised on this stuff. I was raised on Mary and Jesus and all of this stuff. So I wonder, would it appeal to me? But it really has. Like, I mean, it could be like
spiritual culture shock. Like, that's my sympathetic interpretation of what Jung's saying.
No,
like, I can see, like, if you go to another country, it's a bit alarming, and like, you're like, oh, I don't know how anything works. I don't know how much anything should cost. I feel everything's off kilter. There's lots of strange things all around you all at once that makes you feel, just weird. And I could see how that would happen spiritually as well. If you just dove into another
even like if
philosophy.
you grow up on like the Brothers Grimm fairy tales or whatever, but then you get exposed to like Greek mythology, these things are bloody different, and like it's really hard to contextually understand the stories from another time in another place. But anyway,
there's there's sort of another element of, well, I mean, we could call it racism or something racial, certainly, about the idea of sort of exoticizing and fetishizing that weirdness.
Which I think there's lots of that happening, right, with yoga. Yeah.
I think that's why stuff like harmonic gymnastics fell out of fashion, just because yoga was much more trendy because it's foreign, which is fine. Obviously, we all like to, unusual things and experiencing other cultures. But when it like slips into treating that culture as if it's like a toy,
I think fetishizing was a good
I don't know,
word.
like
yeah.
So there's something that, again, like I have some sympathy with the cultural appropriation argument. There's definitely something there. But there is a whole like, I mean, other people have noticed this, obviously, and a big group who have noticed this are the Christian sort of, hardcore Christians in America who say we don't want our kids doing yoga. That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different religion. We don't want them dapping their toes in that. So they've made their own Christianized yoga. So if you wanted to do like yoga for Jesus, you can try that out next time you're in the US. I'm sure you'll find a class. I mean,
it would be kind of cute. You could use a rosary instead of mala beads.
There you go. They're almost identical.
But this is, so what I've kind of took from dipping my toe in the philosophy is just how cool the psychological aspects of it, which I didn't grow up with that, at least that interpretation of things from the Bible. And I like story. So I'm taking story everywhere I can get it. And in that sense, it's helpful. What I do have a problem with is how much there is to it and how contradictory a lot of the ideas are. And like I said, they're I don't mean like everyone, but on the whole, a lot of these texts, you're meant to read them like this and this is true. I think, I don't think you...
Like two contradictory things are true.
Yeah. Which
it
can be...
Yeah, again, that's not really I can't really think that way, I don't think.
Yeah, and even I can run into problems with it. Like, you have to do a lot of work to decide what you believe in this, and maybe believe it's the wrong word, but what's the story you want to tell? What do you find helpful? And I'll quickly just mention the book that you lovelily gave me for, was it Christmas? But Yoga and the Quest for the True Self, by this guy Stephen Cope, set in Kripalu, which is still running today, but it's quite different from it was back in 1989. And it was a psychologist who wrote it. So what he kind of does is he will take a lot of these aspects of yoga, especially the philosophy, and kind of break it down into a kind of helpful psychology-based way. Like he talks a lot about the concepts of awareness versus equanimity. And
what's the difference?
So awareness is more like the mind, wisdom, insight, and it's the observer in us, right? Which is good. It's good to have awareness.
Yeah.
But without equanimity, it's kind of like cold and judgmental. So equanimity is more like calm. It's based in the heart. It's compassion. It's building up the self rather than just seeing through the self. It represents the mother. It represents bears. He's got
bears.
I can't remember the story behind that.
As in like panda bears,
grizzlies,
koala bears, grizzlies.
There's a story in the book that explains this. But anyway, it's this idea that I don't know. He will even bring in some like CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy stuff.
Oh wow.
And yeah, definitely.
I mean, I bought this book many years ago and I really enjoyed it. And my mum read it as part of her teacher training, which is how I got it in the first place. And this was before I considered myself a skeptic. And I was very moved by it, which is why I got it for you, because I was like, well, this did it for me back in the day. I'm sure it'll do it for her too. But I don't remember all these details. But I do remember it being interesting that he took sort of the insights of modern psychology and took apart yoga philosophy in that context and sort of put it together in a way that I felt made a lot more sense for my analytical brain.
And I think what I was trying to say, just really looking at my notes, was something more to do with the idea that traditional therapy that we're seeking in the West misses out that equanimity part, misses out like the heart, as it were. And you could see that like yoga and practices like that. It's kind of like the balancing aspect of psychology. And there's this great guy, he's an astrologer, but he talks about astrology being quite like a mind-driven, masculine yang practice.
Oh yeah, I always think of astrology as a very masculine thing. If I click on an astrology website, or someone says, if you met my friend, they're an astrologer, what I expect is like a builder still wearing his yellow high vis, just dusting his hands off of brick dust. Go and get your chakras out,
what
love.
I mean by masculine. you're making it gender specific. Whereas something like yoga, specifically Bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, which is super yin and feminine and soft and heart driven, that's like a good balance to it.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I would,
I see that.
So a lot of this like personal development stuff.
You can't get me to go along too far with as soon as you mention astrology, I'd start feeling self-conscious about even talking about astrology on a podcast.
We did not agree to this today.
No.
So
I need a safe word. Actually, yeah. So my safe word is, you're a big yoga nerd. Let's stop talking about the spiritual stuff and get down to some facts. Because I've been doing a little bit of research about the physical problems that people have encountered when they're doing yoga. So obviously we've mentioned this, and it's kind of like a sidebar, but it's true. A lot of yoga teachers talk a lot of nonsense about our physical bodies. They'll tell you things about, for example, you can't go upside down when you're on your period because the blood will run backwards into your womb and make you pregnant with like a bad baby. I don't know. They have all sorts of strange ideas. They talk about wringing out toxins. They talk about your energies being misaligned and you have to do strange things, strange made up cures it's just a lot. There's a lot of pseudoscience, but that's just sprinkled on top of yoga. That's not yoga itself, but you'll find people in the changing rooms talking about these strange alternative health stuff, which is obviously not very much fun for me, especially when you're sitting at the reception desk and having to listen to it and not really feeling like it's your place to put your hand up and say, hey, have you checked the efficacy of that cure? But yeah, so specifically to yoga, as I mentioned, my mum's a yoga teacher. So I said to her, what's your worries about yoga? Like, she's been teaching for many years and she's really into this world. But what concerns do you have? And she just went straight to the problems in having people who are not trained properly in giving classes. Yeah. So the Bikram people, for example, and who knows, if you go into a Bikram studio, you don't know what that person's history is. But if someone just went to one of those Bikram sessions, they wouldn't learn anything about physiology. They wouldn't learn what's safe and what's not safe. They just learn the dialogue, which is his script, and they learn the postures. So they might also have an education in physiology from somewhere else, but you can be a teacher and know nothing about human anatomy, which is my mum's big concern, because she sees people trying to force themselves to do things that will actually hurt them sometimes in classes. So the first example she thought of was, there's this idea in Ashtanga that everyone can do lotus position if you just
do it more.
If you just train and you try hard enough. Exactly, do it more. That's generally the advice, apparently. But if you picture the top of your thigh bone, so you've got the bone, and obviously at the top of the bone there's like a knobbly bit, and that fits into your hip socket. So if you have a very shallow hip socket, like a shallow bowl that knobbly bit at the end of your thigh bone is going to, these are technical terms. And just you can imagine that you get a lot larger range of motion, because the knobble of the top of the bone can slide around in there in lots of different directions. In fact, if your hip socket is too shallow, then people have problems with them popping out. But in the other direction, if you have a very deep hip socket and the knobble fits in very tightly, like a very deep, rounded, concave bowl, then you have a lot less range of motion. And for people like that, and it's all a spectrum, like there's some people with super shallow, some people with super deep hip sockets, and most people are somewhere in the middle. But people who have super deep hip sockets will never be able to force themselves into the lotus position because it's actually impossible.
Structural.
Their bones are just jutting against bones.
It's not about the ligaments or whatever. It really is the structure of the bones.
So what my mum said is people like this come along to Ashtanga classes and they're told, if you just keep trying, you'll get into lotus position. And what happens is most of them get fed up of this nonsense and
injure
leave.
themselves.
So the Ashtanga... Yeah, maybe, but the Ashtanga community can continue believing that everyone can do lotus position because everyone who stays can.
Yeah.
So you have this strange, it's called selection bias in science. So basically the data collection isn't random. It's pre-selected to support a particular conclusion. Like if I went into a cheese shop and said to people, what's your favorite food? I'd probably get cheese as an answer more often than other foods because that's the context. So I've biased my selection. I'm only selecting people who are already in a cheese shop. And Ashtanga people, their selection is people who stayed in the class because they liked what was being taught because they could do it. So the myth just persists and they keep forcing it on people.
Yeah.
So that's actually, you can't, I'm sure there are people who have had problems because of this, but there's many other, very, very similar things that happen in the yoga world where the yoga community will believe that it is possible for everyone to do something. And that's just not true, which really sucks for the people who can't do it because they either think they're losers and give up, or, as you say, end up hurting themselves because they're pushing their body to do something that it's physically incapable of doing.
Yeah.
The big difference my mum said was really important for her to learn is the difference between tension and compression. The example she gave is if you put your hand above your head and then keep your body parallel and just lean over to one side. So as if imagine you're standing between two walls, you're not leaning forwards or backwards, you're just going over the side. And you feel a stretch all down under your armpit and all through the side of your body. And that's tension. You're like all those muscles and stuff and everything that's down there. I don't know my anatomy, but everything that's down there is stretching out and you can keep pushing further into that stretch. And you'll find if you do it more often, you can get further and further. But on the other side, where your rib cage hits against your hip point as you make that same movement, that's compression. And when the bottom of your ribs hit the top of your pelvis, you can't go any further. That's bone. You can't just keep pushing and go further. So you have to learn as a yogi, as someone who practices yoga, but especially as a teacher, to be able to diagnose the difference between tension and compression. Otherwise, you'll push people too far. And that is what we see again and again. Like if you start searching for injuries related to yoga, it's always the same story, different parts of the body, different positions and stuff. But it's the same thing. People who can't do stuff being forced to do stuff and just really wrecking their bodies.
And again, it's people who are, even if they are trained, there are so many different types of body, like we're all different. And if it's not drilled into somebody to be aware of all the possible contraindications of like every pose, you are going to make these errors. And, I've definitely had teachers force me, doing adjustments on me, and forcing me into something that hurts. And then not wanting to feel like a bitch for saying, back off.
Yeah. I said to my mum, we should it would be really useful as part of teacher training to have like a full body X-ray and stuff, so you can actually see what's going on in your body and you can learn not just how a body works, but how your body works, and then maybe you gain some awareness of there are different people have longer and shorter hamstrings that has an effect on how far they can bend down, things like that. But there's this problem where there's a certain type of person who goes to learn to be a teacher trainer, and they're usually like a young woman who's very good at yoga already and very bendy and very slim. And then they assume that everyone in their class will be able to do what they can do, including things like shoulder stands is a really big concern for medical reasons, because when you're in a shoulder stand, your neck is at a 90-degree angle with your spine, more or less. It's a really sharp thing, and you're putting a lot of pressure on the cervical vertebrae there. which is absolutely fine for most people if you're all stacked up nicely and, you know, that's fine. But if you're particularly heavy, like heavier than average, and remember, like yoga was invented by people who are very slim and fit and young. They weren't heavy. Nowadays, like modern people like us doing a shoulder stand, we're putting a lot more weight on that cervical vertebrae than the people who invented these positions did. And then if you get it ever so slightly wrong, which is not unlikely in a yoga class where the teacher can't keep her eye on however many students there are, that can cause really serious problems. I mean, in very rare occasions, like you constrict blood flow and you can cause brain damage. And that's happened to people. Yeah. It's not common. There's a great, well, I don't know if it's a great really, but there's an article in New York Times from a few years ago. And they interview this guy, Glenn Black, who's a yoga teacher. And he's particularly concerned about what he sees to be just like really serious injuries happening to yogis. But it's all anecdotal evidence. So I've no idea how common these are, really, how common these injuries are. And they can't be super common. But the point is, when you go into a yoga class, you don't know if the person who is teaching you is adequately trained or really trained at all in anatomy and physiology. And there's sort of this, because they're the teacher, they have this sense of authority. So you sort of assume they are. And like you're saying, you don't want to be the doofus who can't get into the shoulder stand. So you just force yourself into the shoulder stand and that could end up really hurting you.
One thing I'll say is that I think, moreover, like everyone who's doing yoga or any bloody sport, every time you get up off a chair, it's your responsibility to know your body. And I think a yoga teacher, rather than teaching somebody how to do a pose, even how to do a pose safely, the best thing they could teach somebody is how to know what you need for your body. Because that's safe. Yeah, right?
I like the idea of knowing your body. And I feel like, I mean, because I've been practicing yoga for quite a long time and I kind of have a sense that I do know my body and I know the limits of what I can do with my back, considering the injury I had and stuff. But knowing your body is actually really hard. And most people, when they come into yoga class, don't know that. They don't know what, like when my mum said that thing about the difference between tension and compression, I was like, oh, I can feel it now, but I've never thought of it that way before. Like, it's not, I mean, for your average person, like knowing your body, you might think you do, but actually, especially if you've never done much exercise before, like I had no idea before I started running how far I could run. And I would just run and then I'd be too far away from my house to run back because I didn't know how far I could run.
But it's the idea that yoga could be the thing that teaches you this stuff. Because that is definitely what I've got. And I've got that from bloody YouTube videos just as much as anything else. Because I do think, for example, you know, props to Yoga with Adrienne and other teachers who are really taking this safety thing seriously, almost too seriously. But, you know, part of that is they are teaching you, even through the camera, to work stuff out for yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I haven't really, I'm agnostic on, I love Yoga with Adrienne and I'd looked into this. I never even bother looking at how many like people watch anything on YouTube. So I didn't know. I've been using her videos for like a year at least. I didn't know how popular she was, but she sold out Alexandra Palace in London, a really big venue. She goes all over the world teaching yoga. She's a really big deal. I thought she was just a little lady who lived in my iPad, who I did yoga with.
Yeah.
That was my conception of her, but she's a really big deal. And obviously it's good because it's free. That's really nice. There's no pressure to like feel like the other people in the class are judging you. So maybe you don't go as hard on yourself. But the problem is, and this is something my mum's really concerned about, is that because you've got no one watching you, you might be doing poses wrong and in a way that could hurt you if you continue to do them. And there's no one there to say, oh, be careful.
I agree. I mean, and that's the point of going to a class. The only thing about that is, you know, most teachers, like going back to what you were saying, aren't that great at knowing that. And if you've got a busy class, some of the classes I used to go to, even if the teacher was fantastic, they simply couldn't see what we're doing all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, the answer that a lot of people jump to is that there should be some sort of regulation of yoga teachers. And in the UK, there's an interesting, it's been ongoing since I've been in the yoga world. I've heard people talking about this. There's the governing body of British yoga is the British Wheel of Yoga. And the title governing body is something that was given by the government, but it's pretty much, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. It's just a title. What they want to do, and have wanted to do for a long time, as far as I understand it from the gossip in the yoga changing rooms, is have some sort of regulatory power to ensure safety. So they want the government to say, only you can teach yoga teachers, and you have to do it in this sort of way. But then obviously there are some people who just suspect, well, these guys just want a monopoly on teaching yoga, and that doesn't seem fair either. So at the moment, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but I suspect it's similar. There's no regulation of yoga teachers. Anyone can teach. You don't have to have done any kind of teacher training at all. You can just go and put a sign in your window and say yoga teacher. But most studios and gyms wouldn't consider taking you on to teach yoga unless you have your certificate to say that you've been trained.
And I know how dangerous this can be. I mean, I was telling you before we started the podcast about a class I've just taken in Portugal, which was all in Portuguese, which I don't speak. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was the fact that this guy just gave us a series of, I would say, advanced poses without any warm up, without any transitions, and without any modifications. So it was like the opposite of what I've ever been taught to do in a yoga class. Completely mad. And, I would have thought that if anyone, I would love to have somebody walk into that class and be like, mate, what are you doing? This is like verging on illegal. I'm amazed that I walked out without an injury,
Yeah. But did you, before you went to the class, did you check his qualifications online?
Or there were none.
You just turned up because it said yoga?
None of those. I mean, there aren't very many yoga studios here anyway, but it's not like, they're not like plastered with, what's it called?
Certificates.
Yeah, and even that Yoga Alliance, for example, who I'm registered with, you don't see any of that stuff.
So I think maybe that's the answer. Instead of going for government regulation, which does make me nervous because I don't know these British Wheel of Yoga guys. They might be, who knows what their deal is. I don't like the idea of a monopoly in general. But perhaps it would be better to just change the culture of yoga so that we focus more on literally having, if you've got a yoga studio and you have teachers teaching there, have their certificates out on the wall. Maybe someone can make an app where you can check if your yoga teacher's been reviewed and if they've been reviewed positively or negatively by students, and you can see all their qualifications. I think there's something similar for teachers.
I like the idea of Ofsted inspections, as much as teachers.
Oh yeah, secret shoppers.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, because you can get these, you might pay your way through it, or, do a really good teach when you were qualified, but to actually continue a good practice and be really ethical, I like the idea of somebody coming in and checking up on you. I probably won't say that in 5 years, but
yeah, that would be good. No, but it's difficult because, like you said, you don't want to be the one to go, this is rubbish, mate.
Yeah.
That's a hard position to put yourself in. But I think if you're going to take yoga seriously, maybe more, especially people who are more advanced, who know their shit, should be prepared to, because my mum tells stories of going to classes and seeing things done badly. And does she stand up and say, I think that's wrong? Unfortunately not. She doesn't have the confidence, or she doesn't feel it's appropriate or whatever. And just the bad practice continues. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is, but it's been a hot issue for a long time amongst yoga people. And there doesn't seem to be anything happening at the moment that I could find with a quick Google. But it seems like someone needs to innovate in this space. So listeners, if you feel like app building, there's one to consider, some kind of, or maybe it already exists, some kind of thing to keep an eye on the yoga world and see who's teaching safely and who's not.
Are there any benefits to yoga physically?
Oh, sorry. I've just gone on about all this negative stuff for so long. I mean, obviously, depending on what kind of yoga you're doing.
There's Kriya yoga, which can actually stop our bodies from decaying.
Oh, well, that does sound promising, doesn't it? That's one of the problems, like I was saying. There's so much pseudoscience that is right next to and sometimes overlaps with the yoga world. They make many teachers will make these incredible claims for the health benefits of yoga, which are just exaggerated and quite bonkers. But obviously you're doing physical exercise, you're raising your heart rate, you're stretching. Stretching is good for us. It makes us feel good. It loosens us up. It's good after exercise, so you don't get all tense and horrible. Stretching is good. Cardiovascular exercise is good. Meditation, well, that's a bit of a debate, but surely calming down is good. So there are loads and loads of physical benefits to yoga, and probably I mean, it's like, I've just talked about the potential dangers of yoga, but really there are potential dangers of every sport. Like running is dangerous. People hurt their knees. The difference with yoga is no one's aware of those potential dangers, whereas people who run generally are aware of the potential dangers. So that's the problem. But I think it's just like any other exercise discipline. There are lots of benefits and some risks. And if you go in open-eyed knowing what they are, then you can get a lot out of it physically and, mentally, as far as relaxing and, feeling more at home in your body. That's what it's done for me. So yeah, loads and loads of benefits. And like you're saying, spiritual benefits, it seems, for some people.
I love it.
So yeah, overall, I mean, you're a yoga teacher. Of course, you recommend that everyone gets down to their nearest yoga studio immediately. But do you have any particular recommendations for our listener if they want to get into this?
Well, if you haven't watched a Yoga with Adrian video yet, then like, what are you doing? Like, without a doubt, I will always come back to her classes, as well as a select number of, like I said, the modified Ashtanga ones. So Leslie Fight Master is really amazing. And we'll link to those in the show notes. And
yoga with Adrian isn't too wooey. So if you're a skeptic listening, you could, she might mention a bit of energy every now and then, but you could mostly overlook it and just enjoy the stretch.
And if you did want to look more into, the woo stuff, obviously there's plenty of that out there, but I wonder if a good place to start is that the book, Yoga and the Quest for the True Self, because of the way that this guy manages to bring the spiritual aspect in with the psychology and other benefits like community.
Yeah. And the other thing is, because of the dangers we've just talked about, going to a class and, find a teacher who has their certificates on their website. Check if it's the British Wheel of Yoga. We know they do a pretty good job. What's the people who trained you?
Oh, so specifically Harmonise Yoga Teacher Training, they're based in Brighton, UK, but Yoga Alliance most people go with them for kind of getting the stamp of approval.
Cool. So look for a big name who is approved of this person, and then just don't let yourself be pushed into a position which feels uncomfortable, and don't allow the social pressure of everyone else being able to touch their toes or whatever make you feel that you have to have a go. Just start trying to learn your own boundaries, and if a teacher pushes you past them, tell them to fuck off and leave. Because that I really think is the cultural change we need in yoga. Students need to be more confident to say, no, I can't do that, and I don't want to do that. Yeah, and
just to add to that, I would say make sure you like your teacher. It's going to be really hard if you feel intimidated or your teacher kind of annoys you to actually, first of all, just like drop in and enjoy the class, but also to say, I don't know about that, or at the end of the class, go up and ask them questions. Hey, this pose felt a bit weird. Do you have any recommendations for that? And scope them out in that sense.
Yeah. And if you do feel like some discomfort, you can always go and see an actual doctor about it.
What?
Like, you can say, this, like, yeah, I know. But like, if you can't get into lotus position, you just can't. And everyone's telling you should be able to. You could pop down to your GP and say, is there something wrong with my hips? And they will tell you, probably not. You're probably just one of those people who can't do it. But if you need to get to know your body, like, you don't just have to like tune in and listen to what it's telling you in some spiritual sense. You can do like investigations with physiotherapies and with doctors and stuff and find out what's going on and what you can and can't do. Because, yeah, we don't want anyone to get hurt. So be careful out there.
Anything else? I mean, like, I obviously recommend it. I actually think everyone should do it.
I recommend it. And I have felt a bit weird because I've been gushing about yoga, which seems inappropriate for a skeptic to do. But I think this is a problem that we have, that we don't get enough overlap between these slightly hippie-ish things, which are actually quite fun and good for you if you're careful. So I would say, if you're a skeptic listener, don't be embarrassed. Just go along and ignore the talk of chakras and enjoy yourself and see, maybe you can become a skeptical yogi like me.
And if you do become a skeptical yogi and you just want to go a bit further, you can develop siddhis, superpowers. You could maybe walk through walls or levitate. All the fun to look forward to.
That is a big selling point. Yeah. Okay. So do it for the exercise, do it for the spiritual advancement of feeling good in your body, but also remember, you might get superpowers.
Namaste. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd really love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And if you're interested, you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at yoga_astrology on Twitter. And you can find me exploring the intersection of yoga and astrology at yogaandastrology.com.
If you liked what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store or wherever you're listening.
Or just tell somebody you know about the show. Thanks for listening.
Sadhguru